This is Your Other Brothers Podcast.
It's like running through an open door. It's like finding what you're looking for. We've been waiting. We won't wait no more. We got a beautiful story. Every moment on and on. We got a beautiful story. And we've only just begun. The best is yet to come.
Welcome home, friends, to Your Other Brothers Podcast. We are a community navigating faith, homosexuality, and masculinity together. From the Jewel to Blue Ridge of Asheville, North Carolina, this is Tom. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to this episode, this series of a series. I'll talk more about this series in a second, but first, let's go and see who else is with us. Let's go across the state to the city of Oaks of Raleigh, North Carolina. It's our other brother, Ryan. What's up, Ryan?
Hey, Tom. Hey, everyone.
Hello. It's so good to see you, brother. And joining us, this is a little bit of a switcheroo, a little bit of a different dance we're taking today from the frozen, not folksy tundra. It's our other brother, Will. What's up, Will?
Hey, we're kind of folksy up here.
No, you're frozen. You're frozen. The Minnesotans are folksy. The frozen tundra, by the way, Alberta, Canada, representing. You're representing an entire country. I hope you've been aware of that this whole time. You represent all Canadians, even though you aren't Canadian.
Yeah, I was going to say the sad thing about that is I'm not even Canadian. So I'll try to represent you guys. I'll try to say sorry a whole bunch.
You're like, sorry. No, sorry. Isn't that how they say it?
And sadly, I don't have my Tim Hortons with me.
There's a moose outside your window. Yeah, we got it all.
Actually, yesterday.
No way.
A moose walked in front of my house, and it was delightful. I wish I took a picture.
Wow.
It was just, when I first moved here, I spent like a year trying to find a moose, and I couldn't find one. And when I stopped looking for mooses, they just show up all the time now. So it's delightful.
There's something poetic in that. When you stop looking for something, you'll find it, or it'll find you, or some combination of the two. Very poetic. That's awesome. Ryan and Will, we were just talking before we started recording, first time that three of us have ever recorded together. We did the big, the 100 episode shindig with five of us, but for three of us together, I'm so eager over these next few episodes. We're going to be mixing and matching amongst the brothers on this show, and so it'll be fun to mix people around and just see what happens. So I'm excited. We're talking about joy today, you guys, and as always, I've invited the brothers who come on this show to be one or the other, like be very joyful or be very sorrowful. So you have your pick of the two extremes today. I'm excited to see where we go.
I call joy.
Okay, right. That's joy.
I'm fine with sorrow, but what if I have like a joyful face and then it's just conflicting? Like,
you do have a joyful face. Well, you have you have a beautiful smile. Your hair is always very lively. Is lively a good adjective for your hair? I think that's a good adjective, right?
Yeah, that's good.
Not to say that you're not allowed to experience sorrow. You're allowed. We're having a episode on joy today. I was trying to think of a good tagline for this episode. Like, we're all on this episode, we were making a joyful noise. And when I thought about joyful noise, I was like, isn't that a movie or something? And then I did a Google search on joyful noise. Did you guys ever see the Queen Latifah Dolly Parton 2012 musical comedy movie Joyful Noise? Did either of you see that? No, I saw commercials for it. It's been a decade now. I can't believe it was 2012. And I remember seeing commercials for it saying, oh my gosh, I want to see that. And I never saw it.
I feel like I should remember that because that seems like such a weird matchup. Like, surely
our listeners, if you've seen Joyful Noise, tell us your thought. Here's the synopsis from Wikipedia, not a sponsor of the show. In this 2012 film, two strong-minded women are forced to cooperate when budget cuts threaten to shut down a small town choir. And then it said, I don't know who determined this. The film received mixed reviews with praise for its songs and acting, but criticism of its script and tone. So there you go. Joyful Noise. I'm curious if any of our listeners have partaken of that.
I like to guess Rotten Tomatoes scores. I'm going to guess that's probably a 40%.
Oh, let me look.
And I'm guessing Rotten Tomatoes also is not
live.
a sponsor of this podcast.
Oh, wait. What did you say? What did you say?
I said 40.
32.
Ooh.
I'm usually closer.
Okay, wait. It's a 32. What does this mean? 32 on the tomatometer? And then 65% audience score. Did I say that right?
No, you
The tomato meter.
Oh, is that how you say it? Tomato meter. Tomato. Whatever.
Tomatometer.
I was focused on the Tom part of that as
of course you are.
I'm sorry, guys. It's been a long day, you guys. We're recording at the end of a long day. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm gonna be going to bed after this episode. Yeah, there you go. Joyful noise. Not sure what that has to do with this episode. We're just making a joyful noise. That's what my thought was for this episode. We're making a joyful noise here today. So here we go. We are, if you aren't aware, if y'all are just bopping in for the first time on Your Other Brothers podcast, we're in the middle. We're about halfway through this 7 values series. We're on value number 3 of Your Other Brothers. We've already talked about hope and humility. And today we're talking about joy. Our third value, our third infinity stone until we fill up the gauntlet. We're getting close. We're like, we've got the index finger covered. Now we got to start wrapping around the rest of the hand. So we're almost there. Before we talk about joy, we did a little hope recap in the last episode for the 2 guys that weren't on the hope episode. And we got some Yobber feedback in that episode, which was amazing. Like, we spent the first 15, 20 minutes talking about hope. I don't expect we would talk about humility because we have no post humility episode feedback from the Yobbers. But when I was editing the episode, Will Cooper, I was very affirmed at the very beginning when I read the description for humility that's on our website and how you drew a parallel from that to something that I can't pronounce, a name of a catechism or a thingy majobber.
The Heidelberg Catechism.
There we go. I was like, wow, I feel so smart. And so, because I have absolutely not read that. And so it was very fun to just draw that parallel from our humble website to a catechism. That was fun.
Well, and I remember asking in that episode if anybody listening to that episode, if they knew of the Heidelberg or the Westminster, to let us know. And I'm guessing that's not the case since they didn't let us know.
Did you get any emails? Did your inbox get inundated with listener emails reaching out about that?
Am I supposed to check my inbox?
You are. You're supposed to check your inbox every day. We'll keep it.
I never do it, and Tom hasn't fired me yet.
Y'all, check your emails. Our listeners, if you want to send an email to Ryan at yourotherbrothers.com. And if you want to send an email to Will at yourotherbrothers.com, please send them an email. Maybe they'll see it a week from now.
Should I check how many unread emails I have in my inbox?
I don't want to know the answer to that. If y'all want to email me, Tom at yourotherbrothers.com, I will read it and respond within a week. That's always my goal with emails. But sometimes I'm good with that. Sometimes I'm not. But yeah, it's we got emails, and you guys can check out our website for all of our contributors' emails. Hopefully they keep up with it. Yeah, here we go. We're talking about joy today. Let's just start rolling into the sponsor of this episode. This episode on joy, it's sponsored by Chalices. All of our sponsors for these series they're influenced by the artwork of Wesley Ayers, artofatlas.com. You guys can check out his website. You can check out our values page, yourtherbrothers.com/values. Our symbol for joy is an overflowing cup, is an overflowing chalice with wine drip. It's wine. We'll just call it wine. It's fine. We can have alcohol on our website. I think we're okay.
Well, I was going to say whiskey, so
I don't think it's whiskey, but
wine is probably more appropriate.
Yeah. Do you put whiskey in a chalice?
No.
Will would.
I'm sure Will would put it in any goblet.
So Chalice is trying to make a comeback, huh? Or perhaps it's a shumback. I don't know. That sounds like a word I shouldn't say on a microphone.
He said it. I told Will and Ryan, we were joking earlier about keeping language to a minimum. I gotta watch these two boys. I gotta keep the mute button ready, or not the mute button, the bleep button at the ready. Well, we're doing good so far. You guys are doing great.
You know, one of my favorite theologians, Martin Luther, he cussed a whole lot. So I'll just take inspiration from him.
Or was he just speaking German?
It's probably the same thing.
It just sounded very biting and harsh. Yeah. And so there you go. But Chalice is sponsoring this episode. Not sponsored by my sister's childhood friend, Chalice. I had that random thought earlier.
Really?
That my sister had a friend growing up, Chalice. Shout out to Chalice.
Sharon,
I'm sure she's great.
Like Sharon, but
yeah, but
Alice
Chalice
on the back.
Exactly, Chalice. I don't know how it was spelled. If it was spelled like the goblet, or if it was spelled in another way. But that is the sponsor for this show. And I love that image of a cup, not just 3/4 of the way filled, but the fact that it's to the brim and it's overflowing. And that's a symbol of this joy that we have in the Lord. And we're going to talk about our joy as believers, our joy as men, our joy as gay and same-sex attracted men. We're going to talk about the side B journey that we're living, that we're on, and where in the world does the joy come from? Let me read about joy on our website. And Will Cooper, let me know if this harkens back to another catechism. I don't think I would be shocked if it gives you flashbacks to another catechism. I would be in shock. Tom would be shook. But let's read our joy, and then we'll talk about our scripture. So our joy summary goes like this: we, your other brothers, confidently proclaim our joy in the Lord. We praise God for every good thing he's given us, in spite of our struggles and often because of them, including this very community with whom we gratefully journey alongside. And Psalm 16:11 is our scripture for joy. You make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. And our journey with the values, I've mentioned this, this is a fun exploration as we go through these 7 episodes of kind of giving a little, we had our 100th episode celebration, and I think this is cool that we're doing a little time capsule now, like little history timeline of your other brothers. Because what's interesting about the joy value is that joy was lacking. Joy was missing at the start. There was no joy at the beginning of your other brothers. We started with 5 values. Hope and humility were 2 of those 5. There was no joy. When we went to 7 values a few years ago, I want to toss it to Ryan first, because Ryan, I don't know if you remember this or if you're fully aware of this, but joy is from you. Like, you contributed joy. When we expanded from 5 values to 7 values, we were talking to a bunch of the guys, trying to just like put other values out there, because I thought we weren't quite hitting all the things that we're all about, things that represent us, the values that represent us. And Ryan, I distinctly remember you contributing this, or offering up this suggestion for joy. And so I wanted to give it to you, if you don't mind, and tell us, why did you suggest joy as a value for your other brothers?
I do not remember that, so I'm glad you did, Tom. But I think that I can sort of put myself in the same mindset as that moment of time. And I guess what I'm thinking about is so many spaces that I had been a part of that talked about homosexuality and same-sex attraction, or even sexuality as a follower of Jesus, sort of neglected to consider how we can find joy in those places in our lives. And so often my sexuality, I felt like I had to bring it into the communities I was a part of with this attitude of sort of grieving or confession or burden, that if I could choose to have it any other way, I really ought to. And And there just wasn't really a place for joy in the way we talked about it in those places. And I thought, I would love for Your Other Brothers to be a place where we explicitly look for the joy and look for ways to bring joy into our community, to recognize joy in our community, to cultivate joy in our community in the midst of our experience of sexuality and following Jesus and being men.
Yeah, that's so well said. I think you said something to that effect a few years ago when you suggested it. Something exactly like that.
It's also great marketing, who doesn't want to be joyful?
That's right. Joyful noise. Let's make a joyful noise, y'all. This is such a blind spot for me. I'm so glad Your Other Brothers is not completely full of fours, because that's kind of a hallmark thing about the four, is that maybe they're not a particularly joyful personality. They see maybe more of the darker side of life, more of a melancholic disposition. We had a plenty boatload of fours in this group, that's for sure. But that's I think joy to me was such an evident awareness, and I'm so grateful for that we we have our difficulties and we have our struggles and we have the things that are heavy and hard, and that's a big, we're going to talk about vulnerability in our next episode. That's a big part of that. But man, the flip side, I mean, there is so much joy, and it's such an obvious value that I can't believe I didn't see when we first had our first original 5 values. But when we expanded to 7, that to me was such an obvious one. When you said it and when you pitched your reasoning for it back then, Ryan, I was like, of course, joy is a value that we have, because I mean, we're going to talk about it in a big way here at the start of this discussion about where do you see joy in Your Other Brothers, but it's just so obvious to me. Will, what do you have to say about joy? Because I think what I wanted to do, I didn't consult Queen Miriam on this one, sadly. I haven't consulted her in a while. But joy and happiness, you're a pastor. Do you like differentiating between joy and happiness, or is that kind of a tiresome? That's I feel like that's a Christian thing of saying you're not always going to be happy, but you always have joy or something like that. Tell us about joy.
Well, I have difficulty making the distinction, because I hear that quite often and I get really annoyed because my memory could be hazy, but I think Miss Merriam-Webster defines joy as a continual happiness. So it's even happiness is in that definition. Now I could be totally wrong there, but and maybe that's a little bit closer. Joy does seem to be something that's a little bit further away from our day-to-day events. It's something that kind of transcends what we're going through on a day-to-day basis. But I always have difficulty making those distinctions, and I hear pastors make them all the time. And I'm just unsure. I haven't come to a conclusion on that yet.
Mm. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. I remember we were having, I think it was a book club. It was either this month's book or last month's book or something. And Matt, I can't say Matt's. We have 10 white Matts in our community. So I'm not really pinpointing this on any, there's a Matt who said this. But he was, because there was something about joy and happiness in the book we were reading. I don't even remember what book it was. It was again, a couple months ago, I think. But he was I don't get it. They always have just felt the same to me. Maybe joy is just a brighter happiness or a more extreme form of happiness or something. But I know when I was growing up, this was just, again, I had the trifecta of Christian home, Christian school, and church and Sunday school, of just constantly hearing that, happiness comes and goes. One day you might be happy, one day you might be sad, but our joy in the Lord is eternal. And there is truth to that. I mean, it's like putting a Band-Aid on life's problems and being don't be sad, be joyful, or, so that there's kind of a negative connotation when you look at it that way. But on the flip side, I think that's a really critical part of our community, is looking for the joy, as Ryan, you so well put it. Because there's so much of it when you're looking for it. When you refuse to look for it, you won't find it. But when you look for it, I feel like it's everywhere in our community. And I don't think that's just me. I think a lot of guys in our community would say that. Ryan, you're one of the few of the proud, one of the only ones who have been to every single Yob retreat that we've had at camps. And Will, you've been to our virtual retreats. I know those are sources of joy that come to mind immediately. I was curious. I wanted to like go around and talk to you guys and just say, where do you see the joy in your other brothers? Because I wanted to talk about Yob as it relates to this value, and then dive into each of our individual lives as we approach joy in our faith and our sexuality. So yeah, I'd go to Ryan first, maybe, since you've been to 4, count 'em, camp retreats along with myself and a couple others. I mean, you don't have to talk about retreats. Maybe you think about other things when joy comes to mind. But like, I'm curious, yeah, what comes to mind like when you see joy in your other brothers?
Yeah, I think the retreats are a big kind of shining example of the joy in our community. We get to see the joy in each other firsthand, in person, and I think that those are some of the most joyful times, just because we're all together. I think that I think fun and joy are really closely tied together. And I think that we have fun together, right? We have fun together in person, but also in our digital community. There's a lot of fun that happens on Discord. There's a lot of fun that happens at the digital retreats, and I think that, right, I would be interested in kind of like eventually teasing out like what is that relationship between fun and joy, but I think that I see that connection there. And I think that it's not just a joy and a fun in spite of our struggles, I think that there's a joy and a fun that we have in, like I was saying earlier, that we have in our sexuality, where I find this sort of this sort of joy in having the attractions that I do, and noticing people the way I do. And I should try to flesh this out a little bit more as I'm talking. I think that, I've said this before on the podcast, but for anyone just joining us, the drum I'm always beating is the correct response to beauty in nature is worship and joy, right? And so when I see a beautiful, attractive man, that can lead my heart to that worship and to that joy, where I take joy in the beauty of creation that God has created, and I can take joy in God himself through that. And I think that in our community, we sort of, we point each other towards that. And then we also, there's just a lightness to our beings, where God didn't create us as completely serious creatures, there's something just funny about being human. There's just something kind of funny about having a sexuality and being attracted to people, and being able to laugh at that brings us a lot of joy too.
Yeah, Ryan beating that drum again. I love it. I love it when you beat your drum of the things that we should pay attention to. I just love that. Yeah, you've mentioned that a couple times on this show and just in person, just like being able to redirect what could be lust or what could be something sinister and dark and tormenting, and just to redirect it in a sense of worship and praise and joy. And I know for the retreats, just sticking with the retreats for a second, I distinctly remember when we did an affirmation circle at the end of last year's, this would be 2 years ago, retreat now. And we were asking the group, where have you seen joy this weekend? And one of our brothers, he mentioned the fact that he just loved how, during downtime, we would all be spread out in different parts of the camp. So you might have the volleyball bros, they're playing volleyball and it's so intense and so hardcore. And then you have the board game bros, doing charades and things over there. And then you have, people just sitting on picnic tables and talking, and the worship gang, the super hipster guitar people, they're all doing their thing over there. And you would just hear all of those sounds wherever you are. If you just stopped and listened and you heard all of those sounds of all the people interacting in their little circles in different parts of camp. And then you would hear bellowing laughter as well, cascading through the trees and down the hills. And you would be able to hear just all of the camaraderie that's happening, all of this beautiful, it's just when you stop to think about it, it's how is this happening? How are we all physically here right now, joined by this internet community, this thing on the internet that some way, somehow all of us found. And some of us had to start it, and then other people found it and then flew hundreds, if not thousands of miles to get there for this weekend. I mean, there is so much joy in that, in just the sounds of the retreat, of hearing all of that. And that to me is such a, if I have the visual of the overflowing cup of our stories and our experiences, the other thing that comes to mind with joy is just the sound bite of those retreats. And it happens at every retreat too, of just like, if you're listening for it, you'll hear joy happening constantly throughout the weekend. And it's just a beautiful thing. Will Cooper, you really need to come one time. This is just an intervention to get Will to come to a retreat.
I know I say this every year, but I'm hoping this year.
Fingers crossed. What about you, Will Cooper? Where have you seen the joy? Where have you seen the joy in your other brothers?
So yeah, I'll relate it to the virtual retreats, the conversations that we've had, especially in our tribes for the virtual retreats, have been joyful experiences for me. And I think the reason why is, like, I know you're talking about vulnerability next time, but I think vulnerability actually plays within joy. If you feel comfortable and safe being vulnerable, and not just that, if people if others get excited or enjoy your vulnerabilities, like that they're not like something to be ashamed of, but like it's something that's even life-giving to others, I think that produces a decent amount of joy. So like for the SSA gay side B Christian, we always have to like be guarded. We always have to be careful how we present ourselves or what we say, even like the language we use. Like, I'm like, do I say SSA or gay? I have no idea. And it drives me crazy.
I know. I saw you like slowly, like making sure you said every label. I think you missed 3 or 4 labels in that sentence, but
it's like,
it's like, hopefully there's a listener out there who isn't offended by the lack of label that you did not give them. But I hear what you're saying. So you're saying then the vulnerability piece of just like being able to let loose a little and just be comfortable and be to be safe with people, and that then can produce a comfort and a joy. Yeah,
like I think being able to like relax around people produces a sense of joy. And so like, because being guarded is stressful. And so it's being able to take away those guards, I think, is pretty essential.
That's so great. And I didn't tell you to do this, but I love the connections to our other values, because they really do all feed into each other. Like hope and humility, there was a strong relationship there that we touched on. And I love that we're just like connecting them right along, joy into vulnerability. Because you're so right. I didn't think about that as I was thinking about today's conversation and this value, but you're so right. Like when the safety is there and a comfortability can happen, like it's just like checking boxes that then open up the flower so that it can bloom even more. And there's just so much joy that happens in our community, whether it's a camp retreat, whether it's a virtual retreat. Our Zoom calls are so fun. I look forward to our Zoom calls all the time. They're always like very substantive discussions, but then I'm dying laughing at least once or twice on every one of these calls. Like, and that's not an exaggeration. These guys are funny. We have a funny group. They're so funny.
The ability to make gay jokes is wonderful.
Yeah. That's something I was definitely thinking of. And on the topic of the calls, I remember maybe my first year in Yob, getting on the early calls before Zoom. We were on like Google Video or something or whatever.
Google Hangouts, yeah.
Google Hangouts, yeah. And I just remember like the call would end at like 10 p.m., but I wouldn't be able to fall asleep until midnight, just because it was like such a joyful experience that, I couldn't, it took a while to land the plane, as the Matt we mentioned earlier would say.
Shout out to the white Matt if he's out there. That's as much detail as we can give. I hope he feels honored that we're giving him a shout out without outing him or telling where he lives or anything like that. We love our Matts in our community. We got so many of you. Yeah, I mean, and it just keeps going from Zoom calls to Discord. We have a Discord server where a lot of discussions serious discussions, but a channel where we can just be silly and talk about what's happening and in pop culture or the latest jokes, latest memes that are out there or TikToks or whatever. And it's just been it's been a fun journey. I mean, again, I think this harkens back to a therapy session that I had last year. I will remember, this is one of the few therapy sessions I will like always remember. You know, some of them just roll together and who knows what we talked about on this day or that day. But I remember one therapy session where I was particularly struggling with something, and my therapist just asked me, Tom, what are you doing for fun right now? And I was at the time so annoyed at him because I was like, that is the most frivolous, pointless question because that has nothing to do with my pain and my sorrow and my struggles. Like, what am I doing for fun? What does that have to do with anything? That's such a silly question.
I love that happened to you, Tom.
You love that for me. Yeah, but it was like, look in the mirror again, my dark, foreful heart. I just had to be like, you know, what am I doing for fun? Because that's so important. I think it's so easy in this side B, SSA, gay, queer, side Y, whatever label that I'm missing. This community, it's so easy to get like bogged down in the struggles and again, vulnerability. We talk about struggles. We talk about hard, difficult things. That is one of the hallmarks of our community for sure. If you let that dominate you, if you let that dominate a web space, if you certainly let that dominate your life, it's not going to take you very far. And I think this joy piece is so obvious and so great that it exists. I'm so glad we put language to it, that we've named it, that it's on our website. And that I think I get the sense that people in our community would be able to echo that same sentiment to the point that at this year's retreat, we had 2 joy tribes. We couldn't handle just one joy tribe. We had to have 2 joy tribes because there was too much joy to be had. So I don't know. It's just a snapshot of this community. And it's just, again, the piece that I'm just so grateful for is like, how did this happen? I might take a little credit for buying a website 6, 7, 8 years ago, but then like all the pieces coming together and like, where the heck did Ryan come from? Where did Will Cooper come from? Where did all of these other brothers come from? These hundreds of guys now over the years. Like it's the Lord's doing. And it's just been so cool to see, like, it's awesome to just like play your part and then just see other people play their part and to see how this little Lego castle gets built and then to just like bask in that and enjoy it. And it's not always easy. There are plenty of difficult times, but that's just, I think that's just what's been so joyful for me is just seeing God take nothing and form something. And we're all doing it together in collaboration with one another, creating this community. And I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful for everyone listening, for playing whatever part you've played in building your other brothers and creating the joyful place that it is. Because it is, I mean, it's so life-giving for me. I'll just speak for myself, but I hope that that's true for other people too, that this gives you some sort of a conduit for gay jokes or for silliness or for fun or for, whatever other subcategory of joy there is. And ultimately a worship of the Lord. I guess we should maybe put on our Christian clothes or Christian at this point. Something that I love about our community, this joy, because we have joy with one another, but we really do have a joy in the Lord. We have worship times together at these retreats, which I don't know, there's something special. It's hard to put words to it. There's something special about singing songs with other men who all are coming from very similar places, not exactly the same, but very similar vantage points, similar struggles, similar difficulties, similar childhoods, similar proclivities. And just to be able to stand alongside them, a dozen people in this row, a dozen people in that row, and to direct our praise to the Lord. I mean, I love worship in general. Like, I feel like that's one of my favorite parts of just going to church is just singing. I love singing. Singing is fun. Singing is great. But there's a different kind of singing that happens. And I know others would agree that happens at these retreats and that happens with our community. Cause we sound really good. Like our acoustics, we've had some like amazing acoustics in different buildings and places, or even just if we're outside singing, but we sound really good. So there's that. I have to give props to our singers in this community. But then B, just like the heart behind the songs. I've recorded worship for our retreats these last few years, and I love every once in a while just playing those songs back that we sung together once upon a year, and to just be reminded of that joy, and again in an audible sense, because it's so palpable. I love it. And we've done worship at the virtual retreat too, Will. You've gotten to experience that a little bit with guys. They're so cute. They submit their little YouTube videos, and we put a little Disney, like, little follow the bouncing ball, like, lyrics on the bottom of the video. It's so fun. Like, I love our musical boys.
Is that like worship karaoke? Is that how we think about it?
That's what church is, right? It's worship karaoke.
That's never occurred to me before. That's beautiful.
Worship karaoke. Yeah. It's just not one person on the stage. Well, there's the worship leader, but he's got a lot of help. He's got help. And so that is an aspect of it. We also do prayer in our community. We have these monthly prayer gatherings with our community, which again, like, we get serious and we bow our heads and close our eyes and we pray for the community. But there's a lot of joy that comes with seeing the same people month after month. We do these monthly prayer calls in our community, and to see other guys take it seriously. I mean, I wrote a blog actually about prayer at the retreat, and how that's always like one of, if not my favorite parts of the retreat, is waking up at like 5:30 in the morning and having prayer at 6:15 in the lodge or something, and just being able to see other people wanting to do that too, wanting to wake up before the sun does and get together to pray. And I love that for the last couple of years. That wasn't there at the beginning. We didn't pray as a community when we first started, and to see that happen over the years, and to see that other people care about prayer, and whether we pray before every podcast episode that we record, we pray at the retreat, we pray for the community on a monthly basis. Like, the fact that there's prayer happening in Yob, even a group, I'm going to shout out a group of our Yobbers. They do these like weekly prayer calls. They post links on our Discord, and they took it upon themselves to just start a prayer call on a weekly basis. So shout out to you guys for starting that, and just like having some organized prayer, beyond what I'm capable of organizing, because I can't organize all the things. But I love that. I love that we're a community that prays, and there's so much joy in that.
One of the things I always enjoy helping out with is for the virtual retreat. I like to help plan the prayer times for that, and I get a little geeky for that, because I always dig into like the Book of Common Prayer, and arrange like a more liturgical prayer meetings for everybody, which everybody's always pushed a little bit out of their comfort zone for that, because not everybody's liturgical in our community. But it's I love the prayer times at the virtual retreat.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because there are a lot of evangelical, non-denominational guys in our community, and then we have liturgical folks as well from liturgical traditions, and that's something I'm trying to think. Like, I don't think we've ever done something like that at a camp retreat. Again, this is another call for Will Cooper to come to the camp retreat and maybe bring some of that energy to a camp retreat environment. I think that would be awesome.
So which version of the Book of Common Prayer do you want me to bring? I could bring the 1561 version. Would that be helpful? Or
is there a message translation of the book?
I'll make my own version.
There you go. I think you have the spiritual authority at this point to do that.
With swearing.
And now for the 3 p.m. liturgy with 7 F words. No. We couldn't even. But see, look at us. We're laughing. We're having joyful moments right now. I think it's joy. Or is it happiness? I'm not sure. Maybe it's a little bit of both. Let's switch gears. We've basked in the joy of our community. Enough joy. I want to switch gears to Ryan, Will, and Tom about our individual journeys. And inevitably, Yob has intersected our individual journeys, right? So you can't really separate them at this point. It's intertwined with who you are. Sorry, Ryan. Sorry, Will. Yob is a part of you. But to whatever end that you want to separate them or intertwine them, if it makes more sense to do that, I would love to experience, or would love to draw out this joy in your life. Like, what gives you joy, Ryan? What gives you joy, Will, on a daily basis today? Or if you want to look back on your life, maybe in a life before Yob, or a life before Revoice, a life before more side B spaces were popping up online years ago. Like, even in those moments, where was joy hard to come by? I would love to just kind of get a little time capsule, a little snapshot of the joy in your guys' life. How has joy been in your life, or where has it been a struggle in your life?
I was really looking forward to being on this podcast, not because I have joy all figured out, but because I feel like I have kind of a complicated relationship with joy, where I've definitely been through, I think we all probably have a really complicated relationship with joy, but I've been through periods of like, depression. I've been on and off medication for depression. I feel like I look back on my life and joy is more the exception than the rule, in terms of like kind of the big picture, how I'm feeling in life, for any given sort of like week or season or whatever. I think, yeah. And so I'm also a little unsure about kind of the way that my church upbringing talked about joy, like you guys have been talking about, like kind of this sort of hair splitting the difference between happiness and joy. Are we overthinking that? Is that helpful? Stuff like that. Is it, sometimes I feel like that the way we spiritualize joy, not that it's not spiritual, because I think it is, but the way we talk about joy as this sort of spiritualized virtue sometimes makes me feel like when I don't have joy, I'm failing at being a Christian, failing at following Jesus. I just have like complicated thoughts and feelings about all that. I have also found that, I think my joy, the way I find joy in life, really has a lot to do with other people, the people that I'm close to for any given part of my life. I think when I'm at my least joyful, I am the farthest from people. When I'm at my most joyful, I'm the closest to people. And I think it's a little more complicated than just like, oh, if I'm not feeling joyful, let me just get closer to some people and that'll fix it. I think it's a more complicated sort of like correlation than that. But I think that like we are designed to find our joy in and with other people. And I also feel like this, I'm just sort of spilling all my thoughts here, in no particular order. I'm sorry. But I also feel like finding joy, becoming joyful is a little like falling in love. Like sometimes you can't really control it. Like it's something that happens to you, whether you like it or not. And it's so maybe sometimes it feels like something you can cultivate. Sometimes it just feels like I can't find joy and it's not really something I can do anything about. So anyone out there, I've said some very like sanguine things about joy earlier in this podcast, but I mean, for anyone out there who's listening and just really struggling to find joy, just know that like it's complicated. Sometimes you look and it's not there to be found. I think that's what my experience, at least. I have some like Bible verses I would enjoy talking about, but I've been talking for a little bit, so I will cede the floor.
The floor has been ceded. We definitely want to get some Bible verses. Yeah, let's do that on our next go to Ryan. We're going to get some scripture. As you're talking about like the line about joy can be hard to find. I just exited a season of carlessness. For about a year and a half, I was without a car, and there were a lot of reasons why. I got in an accident, and so my car got totaled, and I could have bought another one. There were times where I thought I might. I'm not going to go into Tom's finances right now, but I think what I ultimately was feeling and what I felt the Lord leading me into for a season, and I didn't think it would last a year and a half, but I knew for at least a few months I wanted to just kind of I don't know, just like rediscover simplicity again. Like I lived in a good part of town where I could walk to get groceries, or I could walk to coffee shops to work, or I could, ask friends, Lord forbid, let I ask a friend to take me to church or take me to this place, and just kind of like get better at asking for help and, not mooching off people, but just asking for genuine help, knowing that people wanted to help me and be there to help me. And there were moments like legitimately walking through my neighborhood. I'm just picking this out as an example where I would notice like someone's garden. I would notice someone's mailbox. I would notice someone's stairwell. So many beautiful houses in the neighborhood where I lived. And I would just notice the beauty, that if I was in a car, there's no way if I was driving through that I wouldn't just stop and like look at it. Or there's be like these beautiful flowers. This is a moment of like literally stopping to smell the flowers, of like noticing flowers along a stone wall, and walking by them and smelling them and seeing them and just like being very present. And I know as someone who gets stuck in my head and stuck in my emotions all the time, which is just my natural proclivity, like having those bodily moments where I'm like interacting with the real world, I think has been such a source of joy in my life that, spoiler alert, I got a car. So I have a car now, which has brought a lot of joy. But I was honestly, there was like a moment of sadness in that where I was like, I don't want to go back to the person I was previously and just be totally like deaf and mute and numb to the world around me. And to not notice the beautiful things and to not like, I don't know, just like have an appreciation there for being alive and for noticing things and having my senses that a lot of people don't have. It's something that really did. It forced me, because that's not to say for a year and a half that life was amazing, because there was so much that was difficult in that, not related to reasons of being without a car, although that was part of it. But that's like something that I encourage anyone listening. Like if you're an emotional person, if you're an overthinker, if you constantly feel like you're internalizing everything, like finding those external outlets for appreciation and for joy and beauty, like those have been really pivotal for me, and looking for the joy, because it's there. And sometimes we can stick our head in the sand and we don't want to see it. And there are times in life where that feels like the much easier thing to do. But those moments of reaching out are great. And I know in our community, especially, there's a lot of joy to be found here. And I'm grateful for the other guys. When I'm not feeling it as much on certain days, there are other guys who can, remind me of my joy. And that's another external source of joy that we have. What about you, Will Cooper? What's your relationship with joy over the years?
Yeah, I guess for me, like there's of course like multiple things I relate to joy, but like I actually always go back to books, reading, especially fantasy books, and actually most specifically the Chronicles of Narnia has always been like a source of joy for me. And probably for that one is my first encounter with the Chronicles of Narnia. I was in grade 6. My grandma gave me those books like about 6 months before she passed. And so there is that sort of despairing situation that was mixed in. And then it was during that time where I was like realizing my sexuality. And so all of that is mixed in. So I was a horribly depressed middle school kid in that time. And it was those Narnia books, so that kind of like those fantasy worlds that kind of like helped me to process those moments. And the reason why the Narnia book stuck out is with C.S. Lewis, joy is his main thing. Like he talks about joy nonstop, and in those books he expertly has scenes of joy, and those scenes always stick into my mind, because even though they're fictional, I'm just like, there has to be moments of joy like that. Like they're like, I haven't experienced it, but I don't know. I'm convinced that they exist. Like, so it's like this sort of like hopefulness or expectation that at some point, those moments that exist in those books will actually happen in my own life. And it's and I'm sure Lewis that was part of his intention with it, like that. Those books are somewhat thin on plot, but overflowing with incredible joy that you don't really see matched in any other piece of literature. So it's yeah, so and books in general. If I'm ever feeling down, I just read a book. So that's got my relationship with joy. I find joy in literature.
That's so good. You would bring up books for joy. That's amazing. You're so on brand right now. You didn't bring up whiskey yet, but maybe that's coming. Joy and whiskey.
I don't think whiskey is a it's alcohol and joy is a complicated thing. Complicated. If you want to go into complexity.
We'll have another episode. Wouldn't you say though, Will Cooper, that discovering your other brothers was like falling into a wardrobe of sorts, like this portal to another world? Isn't that an apt metaphor?
Yeah, stumbling on that blog about male nudity was like walking into a wardrobe, and it was
one day. My
life has been changed.
One day in paradise, you can go to C.S. Lewis and tell about your wardrobe story.
or me going into the closet. Is that like a wardrobe?
Yeah.
Or like
you mentioned
out of the closet?
You mentioned like being middle school, and I think that's worth talking about for sure, because I think there are plenty of stories in our community that when we came of age and we started to understand or put words or start to like figure out our sexuality, or that we were different from the other boys, or however you did it, whether you were in middle school or college or the kids these days on TikTok, they're figuring this out when they're like 7 years old, 8 years old now. But like for me, I was 19 when I started to put language to it. And so, not a joyful time, very sorrowful, very despairing, very negative, I would say. But I don't know. I'm curious if you guys have more that you want to say about your relationship to, coming to grips with your sexuality and the journey that's been of like, is there joy? Is there joy to be found in your sexuality as of today? And certainly compared to like when you started to first put language to it?
Well, what Ryan mentioned earlier at the beginning of this episode on like relating joy to our sexuality, that concept has only come to, or I've only thought about in the past few years, because I would not relate my sexuality to moments of joy whatsoever. And there's always so much shame, rejection, just so much baggage related to my sexuality that there is no way that I could associate joy with it. And this is like one thing that I think we could really learn quite a bit from the non-Christian LGBTQ community, is they emphasize a sort of joyous atmosphere, and where their joy is rooted, like maybe different from us, but it's like there's a sort of joy in their sexuality. So it's like trying to figure out like what does that mean for the Christian, especially when there's so much baggage tied to it, and trying to live within that joy.
That's a really interesting thought about the LGBTQ community. You could almost rename Pride Month Joy Month. I think that would be like I think that's kind of the underlying atmosphere, it seems like, behind Pride Month, is that kind of queer joy, like finding joy in who we are. I was going to say about sort of coming to terms with our sexuality. I don't think we need to. I think it takes some time to find that joy. I think there is a period of mourning. I think we have to give ourselves that space to mourn that maybe our lives that we imagined as we were little kids like is not going to look how we thought it's going to look. We might need to mourn some of the brokenness in our experience of the church and our experience of our families, of our communities. I know I had to mourn. I've had to mourn just like the ways that the ways that a lot of my guy friends just aren't able to relate to me the way that I want. And so I think there is joy at one point or another, but I also think that it's good to mourn those things, and you don't have to rush through that either.
Yeah. What's that song? There might be pain in the night, but joy comes in the morning. There's a song. There's like a Christian song, or that might be scripture too. Is that
yes,
scripture?
it's Yes, Lord, I think is the name of the song.
Yes, Lord.
I daren't
yes,
sing
Lord.
it.
Daren't. That word. Nice contraction. That's an interesting lyric. Just even thinking that out. There might be pain in the night, but joy comes in the morning, as if joy isn't here now, which disrupts the notion that we have joy as a Christian perpetually. Like maybe there are times where joy is gone or seems gone, but it's a process. And there's, again, hearkening back to hope. I think there's this hope that great joy is coming, certainly on the other side on this other side of eternity. But like, I hope in this life as well.
Well, and I wonder too if sorrow and joy are deeply related, not so much that they can happen near each other, but like they're connected somehow. It's and I'm hesitant to say that because I don't want to be like, oh, to be a joyful person, I'm going to wallow in my melancholiness. And I don't think it's that at all, but I think there is a relationship between the two.
It makes me think of these two Bible verses I mentioned earlier. It occurred to me as we were talking, this kind of interesting juxtaposition of like joy and sorrow in Jesus. This morning, as part of a like group devotional I'm doing, we're reading Mark, and we read part of Mark 14 this morning, where Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he's kind of distraught and dreading the cross, right? And he's crying, and he's praying that that the cup could pass from him, so to speak. And that's not really a joyful moment for him. But one of my favorite verses in the Bible is in Hebrews. The author's talking about Jesus, because that's what Hebrews is all about. But the author says, it's for the joy set before him that he endured the cross. And if I were a pastor like Will, I'd be able to tell you the rest of that verse, but this is the important part. It was for the joy set before him that he endured the cross. And what I love about that verse is that you can sort of extend that to, well, I'm the joy set before him for which he endured the cross. You know, Tom and Will are the joy set before him for which he endured the cross. And so like, yeah, there's like this moment for Jesus where joy is really complicated. The cross, being crucified, sucks. Being betrayed by his closest friends is awful. He's really wishing it wouldn't have to happen. But he is, but it's something that he attains joy in eventually, I guess. And so when joy is so complicated for Jesus, it's okay if it's complicated for us as well.
Yeah, that's so good. And I love how in each of these we can look to Jesus, exemplifying these values, as Jesus does. Like, and I think, I was thinking about that verse where he like, isn't there a verse, again, Pastor Will, you're here for scriptural, the scriptural, just, what's the word? Authority. Can I say that? But like the part where Jesus is looking out over the city, I don't know if it's on a hill or whatever, but he's looking out over the city, and he's just kind of talking about like a state of mourning or a state of sorrow, wanting to like gather the city underneath his wing like a mother hen, which is such an intimate interesting use of language for that, but just, and you see it, you know, weeping over Lazarus and experiencing human pain, and the fact that, yes, he had ultimate joy as the son of the father of the beloved, and the moment of his baptism, and hearing the words that his father is well pleased in him. I mean, there's so much joy, and then there's so much sorrow as well. And I think, I love how you said that, Ryan, like for Jesus to experience the gamut, both sides of joy and sorrow, I think is unbelievable permission for anyone in a place of sorrow today, that you're not flawed, or if you feel depressed, or if you're, like, thank you, Ryan, for sharing about going on medication for depression. Like, this is all part of the story that we're in and that we're all walking on. And hopefully we can all be a support to one another. Like, again, that's my favorite part about being in community, I think, is that when I'm down, you know, other people can help me just remind me of who I am and the joy that we have as believers, as brothers, as siblings in this faith. Like, I think that's a beautiful, powerful, game-changing part of my story as it intertwines with sexuality. Because I don't know about you guys, I don't think I could be doing this without a community like your other brothers. I don't know, maybe I would have found somewhere else on the internet or in real life IRL somewhere, but like, but I know for me, like, it's a necessity. Like, I need other people who just get it, and you don't have to dance around language, and you can just, you know, it goes back to that comfortability piece, that vulnerability piece. Like, it's a huge part of my journey with joy and sorrow, because yeah, when I came out to myself and wrote that in a journal entry, it was filled. I opened it up a couple of years ago. The pages are still crinkled with tears. Like, I can see the tear marks on those pages as I was writing about this homosexuality in my life, or however I verbalized it at the time. It was a trip, you guys. It was a trip. Thanks to the Yobber who submitted feedback. You're an all-star. You're an all-star, Mr. Yobber. Let me read what he had to say about joy, and then if Ryan will have any thoughts or any closing thoughts, we'll start to finish out this episode. Love the Yobber feedback. It's awesome. It's been really, really superior the last 5 or 6 episodes. Really grateful for it. Here's what our Yobber had to say about joy. Joy was the last thing I ever expected to experience related to my sexuality. Shame, temptation, frustration, failure, fear, those instead were the words that described my experience with same-sex attraction for most of my life. But a few years ago, when I finally gave up, came out to myself, and embraced my same-sex attraction instead of running from it, I was in for a huge surprise. That surprise was joy, floods of it. And it wasn't joy that came because of anything I did or didn't do. I felt joy because for the first time ever, I realized God loved me exactly as I was, and that my being gay was not an obstacle to my relationship with him or his good work in me. In fact, it seemed the opposite. I felt joy in the fact I no longer had to hide a part of myself from God or myself. And I felt new joy in things I'd never let myself feel joy in before, because they didn't fit typical masculine roles, like my sensitivity, my artistic bent, playing the organ, and making emotional connections with other men. The joy I've experienced in all these ways has stayed with me ever since coming out to myself, which I think is a pretty clear indication that God continues to work and bear the fruit of his Spirit within me. When I experience sorrow, it's mostly for those who continue to walk in fear around the issue of homosexuality. Yes, I am sorrowful for those who have chosen license to sin in place of freedom from sin, but even more, I am sorrowful for same-sex attracted folks who suffer from self-condemnation and have never found a place of contentment and joy. And I'm sorrowful for the many Christians who are so afraid of gay people that they lash out against us, even when we're doing our best to live according to Scripture. Their judgment and lack of loving behavior towards us is sin too, sin that is unrepentant in a way that's still erroneously lauded in far too many Christian circles. In response to that persecution, I can only take up my cross and walk in the footsteps of Jesus, who was persecuted far more than I have been, and there I find redemption in my sorrow. But man, it's tough sometimes. That was so great. I love this Yobber. He's been around for years now, and I'm trying to turn the gears on getting him to write a blog for your other brothers. So everyone listening,
oh, nothing like public pressure.
Public peer pressure. We'll have a talk about this. Meet me in my office. But yeah, oh my gosh. So good. I mean, so good to be able to like not live in self-condemnation and I don't know, just have I get the sense that it just like and it looks different for everybody as far as what language you use or how you identify and all that stuff, but like I don't know, to reach a place where you don't hate this part of you and that it can actually be life-giving. And that God wants to use all of you, not just parts of you. Like I don't know. There's so much joy that just came across in that statement that I can relate with too.
I have a quick question I would enjoy y'all's input on. Is joy masculine?
Oh man.
My answer to that is, are we men? If so, that it is.
I kind of meant like culturally. Like do you feel joy and feel like it's out of place in like cultural masculinity?
Yeah, I was being kind of sassy there. I
Sassy Will.
Yeah, once in a while. Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, because I think a lot of men, it's like masculinity is related to like hiding our feelings, like being more like stoic people. And so like joy is not that. Like joy is very expressive, and so I wonder if that does break some of the masculine norms set by our society, just because of how expressive it is.
It seems like there are like there's a narrow set of conditions under which like masculine men are allowed to express joy, and it's like when your team wins a sports game, and maybe when you get married. And I'm struggling to think of others.
Yeah. That's so true. Sports games, we're just around the time of Super Bowl as this is happening. There's gonna be a lot of joy that happens for men in this thing. Will, you don't know what that is?
Wait, the Super Bowl is around?
We're gonna bypass that. Yeah, but
I think Canadian Super Bowl is a few weeks ago.
Canadian Super Bowl. You missed it, Will.
Wait, did I miss that too? Oh man.
You missed two Super Bowls.
I'm really bad with sports.
It's okay. It's okay. You can take joy in other things. But yeah, I mean that's so right. Like there's this like brief little window where men can be joyful, and I think I was trying to think of like what's the other language that you could dress up joy in the greater culture for men. It's like having a productive job or a job that pays well. So it's like being successful. It's like dressing up joy, I think, in more like what's a man supposed to do? He's supposed to make money, or he's supposed to work out and be hot, or I don't know. Like there are other things that you might like dress up that joy in, and being productive, being successable, instead of just being joyful at the core of it all. I think that's such a great thought experiment for our greater culture.
I have one more Bible story to talk about.
Please do.
When Jesus, his first miracle, turning water into wine, and this is at a wedding, and this water was in like these ceremonial washing basins that were used for religious purposes, and of course, wine is a symbol of joy in the Bible and in our spirituality. And ever since it was pointed out to me, I've really just loved that symbolism that Jesus comes and he takes this water that was meant for the practice of religion and the observance of the law, and he turns it into joy. And I think that's kind of like that's one thing that I love about Christianity, is that it's not a religion that's primarily concerned with the keeping of observances in the law and morality. It is finding that Jesus like offers us this transformation of all of that stuff into joy. You know, I follow Jesus with my sexuality, not because not primarily because I think it's like the moral right thing to do, or maybe that's not what I'm trying to say. I guess what I'm trying to say is like the thing on offer for me as somebody who's following Jesus with his sexuality is not kind of the ceremonial washing water. It's a joyful wine set before me, like, to use the same language from Hebrews. Like, Jesus offers me this joy in my spirituality and in following him. And yeah, that's what he offers us. He offers us something good and not something and not something that's sort of just all about the morality of it, the cleanliness of it, the purity of it, and so on.
It's been said that life's greatest joys are inextricably linked to life's deepest sorrows. And I find that to be uncomfortably true in my life. Because it's one thing to have the joy of seeing the Grand Canyon for the first time, the joy of graduating after years of late night papers and 700 question exams, the joy of a particular birthday or vacation or just a really good meal. And I know when I point to some of my life's deepest sorrows, the loss of a childhood dog, a best friend, loss of 2 grandparents, loss of dear, dear friends, I look to the flip side of those guttural cries, those weepings in my bed, and I recognize the joy overflowing in all of those bonds, all of those relationships that are no longer. And I don't know if it's the same for every single person on this planet. If the same thing is true, that life's greatest joys, life's greatest sorrows come through this outlet of relationship. But I know for me, it feels blaringly true, uncomfortably true, because when these relational fixtures turn into fissures, the gaping hole, the shattered glass, the darkness has never felt more palpable. I remember starting Your Other Brothers in the fall of 2015, and the anticipation that went into designing the website and blogging our first posts, having a game plan on social media, and setting a launch date. And I remember hitting the button, making the site go live for the very first time, and seeing it in all its glory, all of its splendor. And that was a joy unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. I had written a book 2 years prior, and that certainly evoked massive levels of joy, but co-founding this website, a website that wasn't even really a community per se at the start, creating something in collaboration with other people, other brothers, dear friends. It was a joy unparalleled. Nothing in my life before, and I would say nothing in my life since, has evoked that same sense of joy, this creation of something from nothing, creating something so very meaningful. Something so meaningful then, and now nearly a decade later, to so many other people. Men, women, believers around the world, young and old, single and married. For years, it felt like my cup truly did overflow. And then, as happens with cups and drinks, the vessel went bare. I can't deny that the joy is still there. God was absolutely in our community's creation 8 years ago, and He's here with us now. I believe that more than ever. And yet I hold the tension, this tenuous relationship between joy and sorrow. I hold it in my hand. There's some days where I absolutely feel the joy, I feel it in the hurting laughter, the wince in my cheeks as I smile so widely. I feel it in the guttural heaves, the staring off into the distance and remembering something like the good old days or memories of people, precious people that no longer walk alongside me. Where did they go? Will they come back? It feels incomplete. The story doesn't feel finished yet. It's hard to stay joyful when the story doesn't feel correct. A longing for resolution that just won't come. It seems that our other brother, Henry Nouwen, had a lot to say about all of our values. His words of joy and sorrow seem to hit me in that supernatural way that certain people's words do. I've certainly felt it time and again with Nouwen and some of my other favorite authors, and I pray these words land, resonate, find a tender home with you. Nouwen says this: when we are crushed like grapes, we cannot think of the wine we will become. The sorrow overwhelms us, makes us throw ourselves on the ground, face down, and sweat drops of blood. Then we need to be reminded that our cup of sorrow is also our cup of joy, and that one day we will be able to taste the joy as fully as we now taste the sorrow. And so, fellow sparrows, in the overflow and in the empty, in the crushing, may we ever strive to follow our Savior's lead, just as Jesus took the cup from his Father, endured the rejection and heartache and all manners of suffering for the joy his Father set before him. May we too take our own cups with courage and follow this road for as many days and pages as we are given. May we be a brotherhood, a people, a family, discovering centuries' hidden treasure in a field, gladly selling and sacrificing everything to buy this field, a field of rolling vineyards and the coming kingdom. Come, let us gather around the table in this field. Let us each be an image-bearing reminder to one another. Let us taste and see that the Lord, He is good, now and forevermore.
Wow, guys, I feel really joyful.
Is that a joyful noise I'm hearing from the city of Oaks? I can hear it from here. It's resounding through the Blue Ridge. It's coming from the city of Oaks, and it might even reach the frozen tundra if Will looks out for it. Listen. Or it might be a moose outside your window, Will. I'm not sure. One of those. But that could be a source of joy, too.
You know, moose noises, I guess they can be joyful.
A joyful moose noise. If our listeners have a joyful moose noise to deliver, please go to our blog. Tell us a story. yourotherbrothers.com/podcast.
And anyone who wants to share a joyful moose noise in the voicemail, Tom can share the number for that.
There we go. We always need more natural segues to like promote the voicemail. That's a great one. If you have a joyful moose noise, or you want to give a joyful noise in general, call the Yob line. We would love to hear your joyful noise and play it on the show.
And I will use that moose noise to try to like call other moose in the area. So we'll see what happens.
I'm really intrigued, to hear more moose come across your window. Keep us posted on the moose up there. But as for our joy stories, go to our podcast episode page, look for episode 103 about joy, and tell us a story about coming to terms or coming to grips with your sexuality, how that's interplayed with your relationship with joy. yeah, I don't know. Tell us a joyful story or a place of sorrow related to this as well. We'd love to hear your story. And thank you, Chalices, for sponsoring this episode, for holding all that wine. You know, we had 2 chalices at this retreat. We might have 3 next year. Who knows? More chalices on the way. Love a nice chalice, whether you fill it with wine or whiskey or whatever liquid you partake. It's full of joy. Ryan and Will, I think this was fun. This was fun to have you 2 on the show for the first time together. Just us 3. It was a joyful occasion. I really did enjoy it. I hope our listeners did as well.
Mm-hmm.
Stay tuned next time, everybody. We are crossing. It's the hump day of the values. We're going to talk about vulnerability. I'm so excited to talk about vulnerability with the other guys who, this is again a little teaser, the other guys who have also never been on a podcast together in our next episode. So stay tuned for that. We're just experimenting. You know, we've done 100 episodes now. We're experimenting out the wazoo now. We're just changing it all up. So stay tuned for vulnerability next. That's going to be a really great episode. Vulnerability. That is, you know, if we're looking for obvious ones, it feels like that's about as obvious as you can get with our little community. It's like, maybe to a detriment, like, whoa, those guys are vulnerable. So we're going to talk all about that, the pros, the cons, all the nuances, all the fun little ins and outs of vulnerability. And I'm looking forward to that. I think that's all, though, for today, for this episode of the YOBcast. For all your other brothers, this is Tom.
This is Ryan.
And this is Will.
Reminding you that you are not alone. Even the sparrow finds a home. See you next time, friends.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Your Other Brothers podcast. Our show is edited and produced by Thomas Mark Zuniga. We'd love to hear your story. Comment on this or any of our episodes at yourotherbrothers.com/podcast, or share a story to play back on our show by calling us at 706-389-8009. You can also email us at podcast@yourotherbrothers.com or write to us at Your Other Brothers, P.O. Box 843, Asheville, North Carolina 28802. If you enjoy our show, consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Your Other Bros. Finally, if you'd like to further support our storytelling, community building efforts, consider becoming a Yobber. Yobbers pledge monthly on Patreon and receive perks like bonus podcast content, regular group calls with fellow patrons and authors, and more. Visit patreon.com/yourotherbros for more information. Until we journey next time, we're glad you're with us.